Hi there, I'm Lorene. Growing up, I learned that some families don't celebrate you, they just tolerate you until you're needed. My brother got a house, I got a lottery ticket. At first, it felt like a bad joke, but what followed revealed how deep their disregard truly went. Why would a family choose to erase one of their own? Before we dive in, have you ever felt invisible at your own family celebration? The smell of barbecue and freshly cut grass floated in the heavy spring air as I stood on the edge of the backyard, clutching a gift bag that had already started to sag at the corners. Daryl's new house loomed behind me, its spotless windows reflecting the sun like a smug smile. Balloons bobbed lazily from the mailbox, and inside the house, laughter and music spilled through open doors and windows, filling every crack with a noise that somehow made me feel even smaller. No one noticed when I arrived. I waved awkwardly to a group of distant cousins, but their attention snapped right back to Daryl, the golden boy, the star of the afternoon. Wanda, my mother, stood near the grill, orchestrating the event like a conductor, barking cheerful orders. Russell, my father, nursed a beer by the fence, nodding along to conversations he wasn't really part of. I tightened my grip on the gift bag, cheap tissue paper fluttering in the breeze. Inside was a simple coffee mug I had found on clearance. Nothing special, but something. It felt like a sad joke now, watching the pile of expensive, gleaming gifts tower on the main table. Watches, tech gadgets, a framed plaque congratulating Daryl on his new beginnings. Wanda called for everyone's attention, tapping her fork against a glass with unnecessary force. She beamed as she launched into a speech, praising Daryl's hard work, his resilience, his bright future that makes us all so proud. I stood back, partially hidden behind a patio chair, her words landing like soft, repeated punches. I didn't remember anyone giving a speech when I graduated, or when I moved to the city for my new job. But here, in the glare of Daryl's spotlight, my small victories faded like morning mist. A cousin waved me over to a table meant for the younger kids. I sat down without protest, my knees crammed awkwardly under the tiny table. From here, I watched Daryl beam as he unwrapped one extravagant gift after another, his laughter slicing through the afternoon like the scent of burnt hot dogs from the grill. Nobody asked about me. Nobody mentioned the move I had struggled through, the promotion I had fought tooth and nail for. A little girl sitting beside me looked up and asked, "Are you one of Daryl's friends?" I smiled tightly and shook my head, suddenly unsure if the answer mattered. The sun began its slow descent, casting a golden glow over the backyard, making everything look almost beautiful. Almost. I watched the shadows stretch and shift, feeling more like a visitor than a daughter, more like a bystander to a family I used to think was mine. As the cake was rolled out, a massive monstrosity of fondant and edible gold leaf, Wanda clapped her hands and called for a family photo. People scrambled into position, laughing, fixing hair, straightening shirts. I stood automatically, stepping toward the group. But then Wanda said, too quickly, too brightly, "Lorene, could you grab a few extra chairs from the garage?" It wasn't a request, it was an extraction. A way to clear the stage without confrontation. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded, setting the gift bag down on a chair no one was using. As I walked away toward the side gate, I heard the camera shutter click, followed by another round of laughter. None of it belonged to me. I paused at the edge of the fence, letting my hand trail along the rough wood. In the distance, the laughter continued, a living thing I had no part in. I took a breath, feeling the air thick in my lungs, and stepped through the gate into the quiet street beyond. I thought leaving the party would end the humiliation. I was wrong. The sunlight dipped lower, casting long golden streaks across the backyard, wrapping everything in a warm glow that felt oddly distant. I hovered near the patio, unsure if I should even bother staying. Wanda's voice cut through the soft murmur of conversation, sharp and commanding as she called everyone together for a family photo. "Come on, everyone! Group shot before the cake!" she chirped, waving her arms like a conductor. Family members shuffled and laughed, moving into place with easy familiarity. I took a step forward instinctively, the way I always used to when I was a kid, thinking maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd see me standing there wanting to belong. Wanda caught my movement and smiled a little too brightly. Lorene, sweetie, can you hold on to everyone's jackets for a second? We're a bit cramped in the frame. I froze, feeling the sting of her words before they even finished hanging in the air. I nodded stiffly, gathering up coats and purses like a well-trained assistant. No one else seemed to notice the slight. The camera flashed once, twice, capturing a smiling tableau I wasn't part of. I stood off to the side, my arms full of fabric and forgotten items, the click of the shutter slicing something invisible inside me. After the photo, they broke apart, laughing and joking, as if nothing had happened. I sat down heavily on a weathered picnic bench, the wood rough beneath my hands. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through old pictures almost without thinking. School plays, birthdays, graduations. In every photo, there was Daryl, front and center. I was either missing completely or shoved into the edges, a blurred figure half cropped out of the frame. It wasn't new. It wasn't even surprising anymore. But somehow tonight it felt heavier, like the final piece sliding into place in a puzzle I had tried too long to ignore. Voices floated past me, Wanda speaking to a neighbor. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the words snapped into focus anyway. Sometimes, she said with a sigh, you have to focus on the real achievers. You can't spread yourself too thin. Laughter, agreement, a casual, easy dismissal. I clenched my hands around my phone until my knuckles turned white. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't that they forgot me by accident. It was that they never saw me as someone worth remembering. The sun was dipping fast now, the warmth fading from the air. I stood slowly, letting the sound of the party blur into background noise. No one called after me. No one asked where I was going. My shoes crunched over the gravel path as I made my way to the side gate, the same one I had slipped through earlier, unnoticed. My phone buzzed in my hand. A single message from Kendall. Are you okay? I didn't answer. I just turned once, looking back at the house, the lights glowing warmly in the gathering dark. It wasn't my home anymore. Maybe it never had been. Maybe the problem wasn't that they forgot me. Maybe they never really saw me at all. The apartment was dim, the only light coming from the soft hum of my laptop screen. I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear and stared at the blinking cursor, trying to find the perfect words. Nothing too braggy, nothing too desperate, just honest. I had done it. Employee of the Year. Out of dozens at the school, they chose me. For once, I had something tangible, something that couldn't be spun or downplayed. I crafted the message carefully, short and warm. I attached a photo of the small plaque they had given me, even though it barely caught the gold shimmer in the late afternoon sun. Maybe this time, they'd see me. I hit send, my heart tapping nervously against my ribs. For a moment, I allowed myself the luxury of hope, imagining the buzz of my phone with congratulatory messages, the warmth that would bloom in my chest if they said they were proud. Minutes passed. I refreshed the chat. Nothing. An hour later, still nothing. I tried to brush it off. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they hadn't seen it yet. I refreshed the app again, fingers trembling slightly, my stomach tightening into an uneasy knot. Then the screen lit up. Messages poured in. Not for me, not even close. Pictures of Daryl standing proudly beside a gleaming new SUV. Comments flowing like a river. So proud of you, Daryl. You deserve it, buddy. Wanda sent a voice note, her voice high with excitement, raving about Daryl's amazing taste and how he's always had the best instincts. Someone posted a meme about how success runs in the family, tagged with a string of heart emojis. I wasn't mentioned once. My own announcement, my quiet piece of good news, drowned and forgotten in a sea of congratulating Daryl on a lease he barely had to sign for himself. I stared at the screen, numb, my thumb hovering over my message. I deleted it without a second thought. A clean cut. No evidence it had ever been there. No evidence I had even tried. I set the phone down face first on the couch beside me and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The fan whirred above, lazy and indifferent, like the rest of the world. Later that night, I lay curled on the worn fabric of the couch, scrolling through old photos I hadn't looked at in years. School plays where I stood smiling awkwardly on the edge of the stage, graduation ceremonies where they barely made it past the first photo before leaving for Daryl's soccer tournament. It wasn't new. It wasn't surprising. But the realization settled heavier now, pressing into my chest until it was hard to breathe. It had never been about what I did. It was always about who they chose to see. The apartment felt colder than usual when I stepped inside, shrugging off my jacket and tossing my bag onto the worn couch. The sunset outside bled weakly through the blinds, painting the living room in dull orange. I kicked off my shoes, already craving the quiet numbness of a hot shower and an early bed. But the blinking light on my phone caught my eye. 3 missed calls from Wanda. 1 voicemail. I sank onto the couch, heart tightening without permission. It was never good when she called this much. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, syrupy sweet but tight around the edges. "Hi, sweetheart. Hope you're doing okay. Listen, it's Daryl. He's had a bit of bad luck again. Lost that temp job. You know how things are these days. Anyway, your father and I were thinking, maybe you could let him stay with you? Just for a little while. You have that extra space now, right? Family sticks together. You're the responsible one. We knew you'd understand." The message ended with a click that felt louder than it should have. I sat there, the room pressing against my skin, suffocating in its silence. Family sticks together. I could hear her voice even when the phone wasn't playing it anymore. I stood up and paced the kitchen, my footsteps soft against the cracked linoleum. I remembered the last time Daryl needed a little help, how his clutter swallowed my life, how he slept until noon and left dishes crusting in the sink, how my rent checks almost bounced because he forgot to pay his share. I leaned my forehead against the refrigerator door, the cool metal grounding me. I knew saying no would make me the villain. It always did. But hadn't I earned the right to protect my peace? I tapped the call back button with shaking fingers, each ring thudding in my chest. Wanda picked up on the second ring, voice already coated in manufactured warmth. "Hi, honey. I knew you'd call back." I cleared my throat. "Mom, I can't do it. I'm sorry, I don't have the space, and I just can't." There was a long, heavy pause on the other end. When she spoke again, the sweetness had drained from her tone, leaving something brittle behind. "Well," she said, "I guess not everyone is as strong as we hoped." The call ended before I could reply. I stared at the phone, still pressed against my ear, as if trying to rewind the conversation back to before it cracked something open inside me. A new message pinged moments later. "Real families sacrifice. Maybe you're not as strong as we thought." The words sliced through me with surgical precision. I sat there, frozen, the city lights flickering faintly through my window, and let the guilt wash over me in slow, suffocating waves. But beneath the ache, something else stirred. A small, stubborn ember of defiance. Maybe being strong didn't mean carrying everyone else's weight until you crumbled. Maybe being strong meant saying no. The auditorium buzzed with energy, a sea of caps and gowns rippling under the harsh fluorescent lights. Cheers and applause echoed off the high ceilings, parents waving wildly from the rows of crowded seats, phones lifted to capture their child's moment. I stood among the graduates, adjusting the stiff fabric of my gown, my fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar weight of the cap on my head. I scanned the audience, my heart stuttering with a naive flicker of hope. Nothing. Every seat seemed filled except for the 2 in the 3rd row, marked with the flimsy white paper that read, "Reserved." 2 empty chairs, stark and lonely amid the chaos of celebration. My name was called. I walked across the stage, my face frozen into a polite, practiced smile. My hands closed around the diploma cover, and for a brief second, I let myself believe it didn't matter. That I didn't need anyone clapping for me to be proud of what I had done. When I stepped off the stage and back into the rows of folding chairs, the applause already shifted to the next name, the next child whose family was there to scream and cheer and beam with pride. I waited until the ceremony ended, until the crowd surged toward the exits like a tide, before pulling out my phone. The group chat was active, full of photos. Not of me. Wanda and Russell were at a fancy restaurant, clinking glasses of champagne, surrounded by friends. A long table draped in white cloth, gold balloons spelling out "Happy Anniversary" floating above them. My thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. No missed calls, no text messages, no "We're proud of you," no "Sorry we couldn't make it." Just smiling faces celebrating themselves. A caption beneath one photo reading, "Family is everything." I walked the long way back to my car, the evening air sticky against my skin. The diploma cover felt heavier than it should have, digging into the crook of my elbow as if it knew how empty this victory was. Back in my apartment, I set the diploma on the chipped kitchen counter. It looked ridiculous there, a golden symbol of something no one else cared about, stranded in a space too small for dreams. I scrolled through more pictures, finding none of me, none of this day in their world. It was like I had lived a parallel life, invisible even in my brightest moments. I sat at the edge of my bed, the diploma still in my lap, the weight of it pressing into my thighs like a silent accusation. I thought of the birthday parties, the award ceremonies, the little milestones where I had clung to the hope they might look at me the way they looked at Daryl, but they hadn't, and they wouldn't. I placed the diploma into the bottom drawer of my dresser, alongside forgotten birthday cards and unused photo frames, sealing it away like the version of myself who still believed they would change. Maybe next time I'll celebrate myself. The heat clung to my skin the second I stepped out of the car, the air heavy and unmoving. Balloons bobbed along the porch railing, straining against their strings, and a banner swung lazily over the front door. "Congratulations, Daryl!" I tightened my grip on the small, neatly wrapped gift in my hand, a set of housewarming mugs I found on clearance, and walked toward the backyard, past a row of SUVs and shiny sedans parked haphazardly along the curb. The backyard was buzzing with life. People lounged in folding chairs, kids darted around chasing each other with plastic swords, and a speaker blasted country music loud enough to rattle the ice in my cup. At the center of it all stood Daryl, laughing, slapping backs, basking in the kind of admiration that seemed reserved just for him. Wanda took the makeshift stage first, tapping a spoon against her glass. The crowd hushed instantly, turning toward her as she gestured grandly to Daryl. "We are so proud," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "Our boy building his future, making all of us proud." There was no mention of anyone else. No nod toward the years I spent clawing my way through school, or the jobs I had pieced together to survive. Just Daryl and the halo they hung over his head. Wanda smiled and pulled a large, ornate key from a velvet box. She handed it to Daryl with a flourish, and the crowd erupted into applause. I clapped too, because what else could I do? As the crowd surged toward the buffet tables, Wanda approached me, her smile sugar-sweet. "Here, honey," she said, pressing a crumpled envelope into my hand. "A little something for you, too." Inside was a $2 lottery ticket. "Maybe you'll get lucky," she chirped, already turning away before she could see the flush creeping up my neck. I stared at the ticket, its edges already soft from the humid air, and forced a laugh that scraped against my throat on the way out. The party carried on without me. I lingered near the drink table, swirling the melting ice in my cup, pretending not to notice how nobody looked in my direction. Then came the toast. Wanda raised her glass high, her voice carrying above the chatter. "It's so nice," she said, eyes gleaming, "to finally have someone in the family to make us proud." My chest hollowed out. I felt it physically, the way air seemed to rush from my lungs, leaving nothing but silence, and the slow realization that whatever thread had tethered me to them was snapping, thread by thread. Nobody glanced at me. Nobody noticed. I placed the lottery ticket carefully into my purse, folding it between receipts and forgotten grocery lists. My hands were steady in a way they hadn't been in years. Without a word, I slipped through the crowd, the door swinging closed behind me with a soft thud that felt almost merciful. But their sudden kindness later would make this betrayal look almost merciful. The city buzzed outside my window as I sank into the couch, a book abandoned in my lap, the evening stretching long and empty ahead of me. My phone rang, a sharp intrusion into the silence. Wanda's name flashed across the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity, or some stubborn part of me still craving approval, won out. "Hi, sweetheart." Wanda's voice was syrupy, almost sticky. "We've been thinking about you. How about dinner this weekend, just to catch up?" The words floated lightly, but something beneath them felt weighted, deliberate. I agreed before I could second-guess myself. The house looked the same as always, the manicured lawn, the wreath on the door that changed with every season. Daryl opened the door with an easy grin, pulling me into a side hug as if years of distance hadn't carved a canyon between us. Inside, the warmth was almost suffocating. Wanda fluttered around, offering drinks and fussing over the roast in the oven. Russell sat in his recliner, nodding at the television but occasionally tossing me a smile. They talked about everything and nothing. Weather, neighbors, Daryl's new workout routine. I answered politely, feeling like a guest wearing someone else's clothes. Then Wanda leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, eyes glittering. "You've always been the rock of this family, Lorene. We're so proud of you." I blinked, the words slicing through me in a way I hadn't expected. I used to dream about hearing those exact words. I used to ache for them. Now they felt off, heavy. Daryl chimed in, raising his glass. "Yeah, we're lucky to have you. You're the responsible one." The label hit different now. It was no longer a badge of honor, it was a chain. Over dinner, the hints grew sharper. Talk of family loyalty, of helping each other out, of sticking together through thick and thin. I stirred my mashed potatoes, nodding at all the right moments, my mind working overtime. They were setting the stage for something. I could feel it in the practiced casualness of their smiles, in the way Wanda's hand lingered a little too long on mine. After dessert, back in my car, I checked my phone. A new message from Daryl blinked at me. "Remember when we used to be close? Maybe we can get back there." I stared at the words, something hot and bitter rising in my throat. A memory surfaced unbidden. Me, 7 years old, skinned knees and tears. Daryl laughing with his friends as I picked myself up off the concrete alone. No helping hand, no apology, just laughter. I looked at the message again, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Some bridges deserve to stay burned. I set the phone down without replying, the evening city lights blurring into the windshield. The price they wanted me to pay for their sudden affection would come with strings thicker than chains. The restaurant was dimly lit, all polished wood and gleaming glassware, a world away from the backyard barbecues of my childhood. I stood at the entrance of the semi-private room, smoothing down the skirt that suddenly felt too tight, too formal, for what was supposed to be a family dinner. Wanda spotted me first, waving enthusiastically. Russell and Daryl flanked her at the round table, each beaming like they hadn't spent the last decade pretending I barely existed. I smiled tightly and made my way over, the knot in my stomach pulling tighter with every step. Dinner began with an uncomfortable warmth. Wanda complimented my hair. Russell chuckled at a vague joke. Daryl asked about my job. Questions so polished, so rehearsed, that the edges of the evening gleamed with something unnatural. I picked at my salad, the uneasy sense growing with each sip of overpriced wine. And then it came. "There's something important we wanted to discuss," Wanda said, her voice lilting but unmistakably firm. A crisp manila folder slid across the table, landing in front of me with a soft thud that sounded louder than the clink of silverware and the hum of conversation around us. Inside were loan documents. Daryl's name splashed across the top. Terms, figures. My name penciled in the cosigner line. "He's expanding the house," Wanda said sweetly. "Just your signature, sweetheart. It won't cost you a thing." My throat closed. I looked up at their faces, at the expectation shining from every pore, and felt the old trap tightening around me. The air around the table grew heavier, the noise of the restaurant fading into a dull roar inside my head. "What happens if he defaults?" I asked, my voice low, steady. Russell shrugged as if it didn't matter. Wanda's smile strained at the corners. "Oh, we're sure he won't. It's just formalities." I closed the folder gently, placing it back on the table as if it were something dirty I didn't want to touch. Wanda reached into her purse and produced a pen, setting it beside the folder with a hopeful little nod. Everyone leaned in slightly, expectant. I placed my hands flat on the table. I met each of their eyes, letting the silence stretch out, thick and uncomfortable. And then, quietly, I pushed the folder and the pen back toward them. The chair scraped loudly against the tile as I stood. "If my worth to you is tied to my signature," I said, voice steady as a blade, You've already lost me. The stunned silence that followed was almost a balm. I turned on my heel, walking away from the table, from the expectations, from the long shadow of who they needed me to be. But even after walking away, the final blow would come from the ones who called themselves my family. The hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen, steady and low, the only sound against the night's heavy silence. I sat at the table, the same table where I used to do homework, where I used to dream about the kind of life I thought I was building. The screen of my phone lit up, illuminating the dim room. I read the message again, though I had already memorized every word. You're no longer our daughter if you can't support your family. It didn't sting the way I expected it to. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, like watching a storm from the safety of a sealed room. I deleted the message without replying. No drama, no grand declarations. Just gone. I stood and walked to the bedroom, the carpet cool beneath my bare feet. In the bottom drawer of my dresser, under a pile of mismatched socks and forgotten scarves, I found the crumpled lottery ticket. It felt silly to hope, but tonight, hope was better than anger. I sat on the edge of the bed, my laptop perched on my knees, the lottery website open, the numbers on the ticket almost too faded to read. I entered them slowly, my breath catching in my throat. The screen blinked once, then displayed a message that made my heart stutter. Congratulations, you are a winner, $134 million. I stared at the words numb. The world around me didn't shift, didn't explode. The lamp still buzzed quietly, the refrigerator still hummed. But inside, something cracked wide open. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling the enormity of it settle in. I didn't owe anyone anything. Not Wanda, not Russell, not Daryl, especially not Daryl. I closed the laptop gently, placed the ticket in a safe envelope, and started a list. A new bank account, a financial advisor, a new address. Not a bigger house, not a fancy car, just distance, space, a clean break. In the weeks that followed, I moved quietly. I didn't announce anything. I didn't post cryptic quotes or block anyone. I simply faded out. I found a small coastal town 3 states away, a cottage with peeling paint and a garden overrun with wild mint. It smelled like new beginnings. Most mornings I walked along the beach, the sand cool underfoot, the ocean stretching endless and forgiving in front of me. Sometimes, I wondered if they thought about me. If Wanda missed having someone to lean on, someone to guilt. If Russell noticed my absence when he sat down for dinner. If Daryl ever wondered where his easy support system had gone. But the ache was softer now, dulled into something manageable. A scar instead of an open wound. I stood at the shoreline one evening, the sky bleeding pink and gold into the water, the breeze tugging strands of hair free from my braid. The tide rolled in, smoothing away every footprint I left behind. Some things are meant to be washed away. If there's one thing this journey has taught me, it's that family isn't defined by obligation or guilt. True family shows up without keeping score. Sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Walking away from people who only love you when it's convenient doesn't make you heartless. It makes you free. Healing isn't about forgetting the hurt. It's about building a life where that hurt no longer defines you. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from a relationship for your own peace? What did that moment feel like for you? Share your story in the comments, whether it's a simple 1 if this resonated, or let me know where you're watching from. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Every story here is a step toward healing, strength, and new beginnings. Don't miss the next one.